Okay, everybody, welcome to Mom's Open Table. This is where we bring together GMs, players, creators to share their stories and insights and hot takes from the TTRPG world. My name is Maia, and today we have Kendrick from Tells Yet Told Actual Play Podcast joining us. Okay, so before we dive in, Kendrick, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more? What do you do? How long have you been doing it? What do you got? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so hi everybody. My name is Kendrick or Kendo, whichever you prefer. I use any all pronouns. And I started Tales Yet Told, which was my very first actual play project in 2021. And
Okay.
so I've been making actual plays for about 4 years now. I've been playing tabletop RPGs for a little bit over a decade, from like my sophomore year in high school, somewhere around there. Um, and yeah, like over the past 4 years, I've done Tales Yet Told, which is my baby.
Yes,
It
yes.
is it is a show that it's so hard. It's always so hard to talk about Tales Get Told. I'm so bad at marketing my
there's
own thing.
there's a lot going on. So there's a lot of okay, break it down. There's lots of in the woods.
Yeah,
So how does
so
it work? Yeah.
yeah, back in 2021, Tales Get Told started because I got a new job and it offered me the time and money that I needed to be able to do a little side project on the side. And I love
Okay.
tabletop games,
Yeah, yeah.
and I had been listening to Friends at the Table because my partner's sibling
Yeah.
was like, hey, based on all the things you're telling me about your D&D game, so on and so forth, I think you'd like this. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And I listened to it and I immediately fell in love, and it changed everything about how I think about
Oh, I
uh
love that. Yeah.
actual plays in tabletop games. And so I was like, okay, I want to do this thing with my friends.
Yes.
um it was for some reason I was thinking about Over the Garden Wall. Maybe my roommate was watching it at the time or something, and I was like just dipping my toes into like playing more indie tabletop RPGs,
Yeah.
and like learning that, like, oh my god, there's basically anything you can think of, there's a game for it. And I guess my roommate must have been talking about Over the Garden Wall, and maybe we watched an episode or two of it, and I was like, man, it'd be so interesting to do a story like
Mhm.
this. I wonder if there's a tabletop game for it. And I looked around and I found on somewhere the PDF for Babes in the Wood first edition by World Champ Game Co.,
Yeah.
which you can't find on the internet anymore.
Where'd it go?
Where I don't know. Adam made the second edition, which
Okay.
hugely like popular game, and it is tonally very different from first edition.
Okay,
Where
okay.
the second edition of Babes in the Wood is very it's Over the Garden Wall. It leans a little bit more into like the kid friendly but still scary aspects
Okay, okay.
of that kind of like fairy tale horror of like Over the Garden Wall, but it's way more hopeful, I think.
Mhm.
First edition is like feels like the OSR version
Okay.
of second edition, where it's a bit more gritty and it's a bit more dark, and that's the one we started with. And I reached out to friends that I had played games with and friends that I wanted to play a game with.
Mm.
Um, and I was like, hey, do you all want to do this thing? I love playing with you all, or you're like a very good friend of mine, and I in the case of Marcy, who we hadn't played a game together with at the time, but like we knew each other very well, and we both knew that we wanted to play a game together. And I was like, hey, Marcy, Hilda,
Let's
Gus, let's make this happen. And none of those people knew each other.
Oh,
They all knew me. They were all independent people that I chose from different friend groups.
okay.
That I was like, I want you all to come and play with me together. And the prologue in episode 1 of Strangers in the Wood
Yeah.
is the first time those people ever play a game together, and you would not know it.
I listened to, well, I didn't listen to prologue, but I listened to episode 1 and I'm like, oh, these people have played together. They're super comfortable with each other.
That we were. That was the
Okay.
first time we had ever played a game together. We had like hung out in like a session 0 and like
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
general like kind of like a little hangout, but
Yeah.
like that game was like one of the first time all of those people were together
Oh, that's crazy.
doing something like this.
I mean,
Did
from my point of view, it seemed like there was good chemistry. Do you feel that way still?
I oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's like it genuinely in the most literal form of the way this phrase should be used feels like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. Okay,
Uh,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
right? And it's like after doing that first session and like having like editing it together and like doing like a couple more that I was backlogging a few episodes before
Yeah.
release that I was like, oh, this is like kind of something actually. This
Are
is
we making some? Are we?
I think we're making something.
I mean,
And I didn't think that we'd end up where we are today, like 4 years later, with multiple seasons, multiple awards,
yes.
and like that was not nowhere in the thought process of.
You just wanted to play and have fun and come together and tell a cool story.
And I think that's when Tales Get Told is at its best. When it's me and some people that I know who, you know, we get along really well and we all come together and we're like, hey, we've got this story we want to tell. Let's do that.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So it's hard to find actual plays like yours. Like I'll tell you the reason I know about yours is because we are both a part of the mini-sided network. That's how I found out about Tales Get Told. I was like, hey, this is just a cool way to find other actual plays and like adjacent podcasts.
Yeah.
So quick question about that. It's very exciting to be part of the network. Very honored. So cool what Brian and them are trying to like create and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm a part of it as well. How did that opportunity to join the network come to you? Because mine is like a little different.
Yeah, so I've known Elliot and Brian for a couple of like I want to say like a year and a half or so. I'd first heard about my first dungeon as it was like coming out. I think during its the Valhalla Cat season 9 lives or something. I don't remember what it was called, but that's when I'm like, oh, I've like this seems like an interesting group of people, and like interacted a little bit, mostly on social media, and then somehow I'm trying to remember how they approached me. I guess we just kind of knew each other as people in this space. When for the Wild Sea season, they approached me and was like, hey, do you want to be in this Wild Sea game? And I was like, absolutely fucking lootly. Wild Sea had been a game that I've been wanting to try out, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this seems sick. And also I had like heard a little bit of their work, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, absolutely.
100%,
I want to do this, partially because I love guesting on other productions, partially because it's cool to meet new people, play with more people, and maybe even expand my Rolodex of like people that I want to work more with. But also I get to peek under the hood a little bit, and I get to see like, oh, how do you all do things? And I noticed immediately that like they were very serious about the work that they were doing, which I love to see, right? Because it means that they're going to put in the like effort to make it the best that it possibly can be, and potentially make it something special. And I was like, okay, yeah, so let's do this. And I loved playing that game with them. It was so good that, you know, I just like I kept a rather good relationship with them. I've seen them at a couple of conventions where we've hung out. And when Elliot came out with like very early started talking about the time we have, I was immediately in his DMs. I'm like, hey, I have ideas. I want to do something with this. And even wilder, he reached out and was like, yes, I want you to make like I would love to see you make like an actual play or something of this. Also, do you want to write one for it? I was like, hey, yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Have you ever written before that, or?
I wrote I've published one TTRPG
Yeah.
a couple of years ago called Upon a Pirate Sea. So I had
Mhm.
written that, and I've done like some like light design
Yeah.
that like hadn't been published in games that forever go unfinished in Google Drive folders.
Yep.
But no, it was the first time. Sorry, no, there was actually several that all happened, and there were like several that actually all came around the same time. I ended up writing for the expansion for Tangled Blessings, and then another project that hasn't been fully announced yet. Oh wait, no, yes it has, because it's in public playtesting.
So many
Weird
projects.
little guys. Yeah. They all just kind of happen around the same time, which is kind of weird. So at the time that I accepted, no, but by the time that I did the thing, I had like done a couple.
Yes. Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, no, I just kept a good relationship with them because they're really good at what they do, and I could see that they were very serious about it, and I just wanted to, I wanted to watch to see where that went, and then the day came where both Elliot and Brian were like, "Hey, so we're gonna do this thing."
Right. Yeah.
Would you be interested in it? And I like fake thought about it for like a couple of minutes and was like, yeah, no, obviously. This sounds so cool.
Of course. Yeah. The way that mine is like a lot less shorter story. I think I just joined their Discord, and then I was like, hey, yeah, this is what I do. And then he listened, and then 2 days later he said, we're starting this network, and I think I was like,
so you were just
I was like, you just listened. I was like, are you sure? Me? I was like, okay. Yes, of course.
I've heard some of it.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Okay.
I understand.
There's something there.
There's something there. You're cooking.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, mine was super cool. I was like, are you sure? Do you want to listen to more episodes? Okay. Yeah. Sometimes imposter syndrome hits you a little bit. Sometimes, and you're like, me? But like you said, like it tells you I just started Electric State just because I was like, I heard Worlds Beyond Number. And how they did it, and I was like, can I do something similar? Because I love the sound design and the music and the ambiance, and then so I was like, let me try my best.
Yeah.
And so that's how it was born, and loving it so far. But with the mini-sided network, what are your kind of goals with it? What are you hoping to get out of this like affiliation, other than like we're of course getting like good connections, like this is great stuff here.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I'm excited about is the potential for that cross collaboration. Because once like I come from like a background of like of long form improv comedy, and but also like indie filmmaking, because I went to school for to do that, and like the act of creating a story together with people, with all these different kinds of perspectives is like it's my favorite part of it, right? It's my favorite part of it. And tabletop RPGs kind of is this weird conflux of all these different interests of mine, and so getting all these new people with new perspective and all these different kinds of experiences, like I'm so excited to see like what comes out and the ways in which we'll probably end up like flexing the borders and grounds of like what we
I hear this. What does that cat do to the back?
Yeah, sorry, my cat's a little deaf, and so she yells rather than actually meows.
Okay, you guys, he'll be right back.
You just want to get up.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, sorry about that.
You're good.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what weird things we're all going to end up making together, and the ways in which that might stretch what we currently view as actual play, and like the ways in which that might evolve over time.
I love that. Okay, so another kind of segment we have is called Mom's House Rules, right? Every house has its own rules, and TTRPG tables are no different.
Oh.
So, what are your kind of like personal house rules for playing or running games? Something you're like, I bring this into every game, no matter the system.
Oh, that's
Like,
so interesting.
yeah, like practical tips, safety tools, if it's session pacing, handling problem players, like
What?
philosophical approaches.
But I love being able to give the lens over to my players and allowing them to be descriptive in the same ways that we expect GMs to be able
Right.
to
Yeah.
add
Yeah.
parts to the world, add flavor to it, and bring those pieces of themselves to it. It's also one of the reasons why I very rarely like plot out anything
Oh,
over
okay.
long
Okay.
periods of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Strangers in the Woods specifically is like the most emergent of
Mm-hmm.
a story that I think we do for Tales Yet Told, in that everything is a reaction to the things that have happened previously. And so I'm almost never plotting out what is the story overall, or like
Right.
what is
Right.
the end goal, because it's the journey that matters, specifically for strangers.
Yeah. Have you ever had, well, because I recently, for Electric State Season 2, I always give like notes at the top of the session before we start recording.
Mhm.
One was like, hey, just a reminder, this is like, they're already collaborators, but people were appreciative when I explicitly said, hey, if there's not a jukebox in the diner and you just say there's one and you walk up to it and you play a song, I'm not going to shut you down. Like, yeah, that's
Exactly.
like you're building into the story, you're adding an NPC in there, you're giving him a name and a job and a wife. I'm like, love that.
That's less
Because
work for
then,
me.
exactly, now it's like I don't have to 100% all by myself create the world. But people told me like, oh, I was a little bit unsure, so I'm really glad that you just said it out loud and we can be
Mhm.
that. So have you ever had that where people are like a little hesitant and you had to be like, hey, this is a little reminder or anything like that to help people out?
Absolutely. I think it's a strange position that players end up finding themselves in when they aren't expecting it. Because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's this history, right, of the role of the game master or as the facilitator,
Yeah, yeah.
um, being the primary like arbiter of the texture of the world. And
Yes.
so when that door is open, right, where it's
Hmm.
like anybody can walk through, anyone can describe anything or add anything to this world, I
Yeah.
think that can come off like a lot of players become very hesitant, right, because how much becomes too much, right? Oh, what if
Yeah.
I'm negating something that someone else is thinking,
Yeah.
so on
Yep.
and so forth, which then I come back to that philosophy of like lack of singular ownership over anything. This is a
Mm.
collective story we're all telling, and usually the way that I try to overcome that is I, as the GM, ask
Yeah.
them specifics, right? What do you
Yeah.
think this thing looks like? Or and something that I end up doing a lot, especially in I think this goes across all of my GM'd gameplay,
Yeah.
of I love slowing down and asking each character, what are your thoughts, or how are you reacting to XYZ that's just happened?
Mm.
Because that allows players to bring the interiority of their character to the forefront, right?
Yeah.
Because we only have so many words that we can say. There's only so much time that we have
Right.
in a game, and sometimes, usually, people don't always say what they're thinking, and so we have to intuit that from their actions.
Yeah.
But the joy of actual play, or at least one of my favorite parts of it, is this ability to tell two stories at once,
Mm.
which is the story of the game that's being played and the game that's being played.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that one acting more as a writer's room, but you get to have the player who is controlling the character explain their thought
Yeah.
process of how their character is reacting, so that when their character does just do stuff, we know why, which keeps everybody, both the audience but also all of the players,
Yeah.
aligned in the story that we're telling and knowing which way we're pushing.
I like that. And so I think it's like not only I think it's good to be explicit with some people, just like how their brain works. They just need to
Mhm.
know, like literally just tell them.
Yeah.
But how would you prompt GMs to kind of pull that out of players more? Because there is that hesitancy with like, oh, I don't want to step on your toes.
Mm.
I'm not sure. What can the GM ask that prompts that collaborative storytelling? Like you could just be like, what do you see? Or like, you tell me
Yeah,
what it looks
no.
like. What is
Yeah.
anything else? Yeah.
I think it genuinely is that. I think it's it's one of my favorite moments in Friends at the Table is in season 3 of Hyron,
Mhm.
um, Spring of Hyron, and they're going to this far off like settlement which has all of these like bird like people, and in the period of time where Austin, the GM, is going to like explain what things look like, he stops and asks like, okay, like what do you guys like think, and then they all like just start throwing ideas around. There's a brief period where they're like Google image searching
Yeah.
something so that they all have the same thing, and like sometimes it is just as simple as you might think that you know what a thing looks like or what something sounds like or what
Right.
someone's name is, but sometimes it's okay to let go of
Mm.
that feeling and be okay with it. Truly doesn't matter, like this isn't like a plot specific detail, this is texture which adds flavor.
Right.
Give that to your player. Just ask
Let
them,
go of the
what is
reins a
the
bit.
let go of the reins a bit. Go, what do you think this looks like? What do you think her voice sounds like? What kind of
Yeah.
architecture do you think would be in this kind of place? What's the weather like today? Stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. It's so easy and small where they don't have to do a lot of deep like necessarily like intentional thought like right off the cuff, because
Right.
it also can be conversation. They don't have to necessarily give you the answer, but that can start a group conversation of everybody
Mm.
coming to a consensus over what is this thing that we're all imagining together now.
What kind of thing are you not asking? I'm trying to see like where is like the limit? Is there
Where's
like
the
any
limit? For
is there
me,
any
there's
yeah.
almost no limit unless I like,
Okay.
because I mean, like if there's a thing that I know is true that needs to be true based off of the
Yeah.
reality of the situation or maybe the story that I'm building, like those are going to be things where it's like I know who this major NPC is, right? Like I
Yes,
know
yeah,
who that
yeah.
is. I still might ask details about like the way that they dress because that is not as important as who they are,
Their
right?
motivations and yeah.
Right. And sometimes the details players give me might change my own viewpoint of who a character is so that I can characterize them more like how things are happening for them, right?
Okay, okay.
Or is more in line with the story that they're going with, um, to a degree where there's a thing that happens in Strangers in the Wood, where there is a, I'm trying to figure out a way to describe this that isn't a spoiler, but there is a
Yeah.
character that
Mm-hmm.
is like this big intimidating monstrous person,
Yeah.
who is like I'm imagining as this like kind of scary, almost hungry character who's like threatened like, I'm gonna eat you, kid.
Yeah, yeah.
And because of the roll of the dice and because of like the way in which like the player reacted to that character, completely like it ended up like turning in such a way where this character, because of the rules of the game,
Right.
had to become friendly. And so it almost immediately like became like the mask fell from like the character, the person that they just were was a mask that they were putting on
Oh.
to intimidate, and then immediately they become softer, and like you can still see how they would be scary from a certain perspective, but
Yeah.
now that you know that character deeper purely because of the way that things were described and the way that the game went, I had to be like, okay, this has to change now. That's the reality in which we're living. And so
Okay.
sometimes your plans are going to change, sometimes your
Oh,
characters are going to change, sometimes your
100%.
plots are going to change, and that's okay. That's why you're playing, hopefully, to
Yeah.
to have that interaction happen and that magical alchemy of play create something better and new.
So it sounds like there's nothing that can be truly game breaking.
For me,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, because I know that I can tend to be lean that way. That's like, oh, but I had this certain idea of who this was going to be because I want him to do this and you to experience this. And
Mhm.
then like a dice roll happens or like a player does something. You're like, okay, so now I have to kind of break down his motivations in the moment from what I
Mhm.
originally thought he was going to be presented as.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I personally find that a fascinating exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um of like being able to, and I think again this comes from, in improv a
Yes.
character is only as alive as when they are on stage and performing, and the
Okay,
moment
okay.
they're off they're gone and they don't exist anymore and it doesn't matter, um until they come back on
Okay.
stage, right?
Right,
And
right.
so there is like, I don't know, for me characters are always so incredibly flexible in the same way that people are, and that they sometimes have things that I don't know
Mhm,
until
mhm,
I have to say it out loud.
mhm.
And then that thing is true. And that's the world we live in. And I have to then react to that. And that's what I find fun, of not knowing and the act of finding out as we're going.
Yes. It's like there's a part of it that's like freeing as well. Like, oh, this is amazing. Like I just have like 4 bullet points that I have for the session, and you guys are just gonna run, like all of us are gonna run it together. I love that. But
Mhm.
so there's a question that I have. I asked a GM friend of mine about intentionality at the same time.
Yes.
So because if it's so freewheeling, how intentional can you be? Like if someone has
Mhm.
this character arc that they want to like see through because that's fulfilling for their character, but everything's not really planned and it's just off the cuff, how intentional can you be with their story, if that makes sense?
This comes down to practice.
Okay.
And I will say, and like a lot of the reasons why, like I will always I was prefacing a lot of like, for me that's fine.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
because I have a lot of practice at doing this,
Yes, yes, yeah.
and like not just like improvising something, but improvising a story that comes back together towards it where no pieces get left off.
Okay,
um
okay.
and I anytime I'm making up something, I am doing it within the bounds of the reality in which we are already living in. Very rarely am I sometimes I will make something completely new up, but then it's still up to me to be like, okay, I have to make this fit back
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
to how things work. And the part of the freeing nature of a lot of it not being planned is that there's so much freedom that things can fit together in whatever way I need them to fit
Mm-hmm.
together for them to
Okay.
make sense. And especially, I keep coming back to it, but something like Strangers in the Wood in Sublime County ends up
Yes.
becoming something so strangely multifaceted
Mm-hmm.
because of it. And there are so many truths that live together, like neatly together, that normally shouldn't in a lot of genres, or like usually we shouldn't,
Yeah.
or like we wouldn't think that these things should fit together. um and I think that brings, and like a lot of that is like a lot of the magical realism that comes from it, and a lot of like the surrealism of that setting comes from the okay, we can say things, they are now true, but they are true, and so we have to ground them into the physics of this
Yes.
world,
Yeah.
even if it is something absurd and out of that, like typically like we would think is like, this is setting breaking or genre breaking, this wouldn't make
Yeah.
sense, but because there were no gates to begin with, we can build the fence wherever we need to.
Oh,
and
okay. I see. I see. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so the
Okay.
emergent narratives from there then go, okay, now that we've built the fence, right? Once we've
Yes.
told the first season of Strangers in the Wood, we have the setting of Sublime County and how weird it is. Now we know the bounds of the world
Mm-hmm.
that we now exist in, and we can be more intentional in the stories that we're telling now that
Yeah.
we understand what it is, and we've tied everything together. And so it
Yeah.
comes from a I think the intentionality comes from knowing internally where
Mm,
lines should be drawn, but also trusting yourself
mm.
to know that you can make that you can take pieces that you've dropped off and pick them back up again and make them fit when and where you need them to fit.
Okay.
um
I like that.
and that just
So
comes with practice. I would not recommend
that
that to someone just starting
so
out.
yeah, like a
No.
new GM, you're like, don't here's a little guardrails for you just to get started.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I love that. So what does your prep look like then? Like whatever
Yeah.
document you use, but
So,
what do you use to get ready for a session?
So for you, I plan out, rather than plot, I plan out the scenario that they are
Right, the
coming into.
situation. Yes.
Right. Here's the situation. Here
Hmm.
are all the people. Here is your entrance point.
Okay.
Play the field. and wherever pieces end up getting moved, they get moved where they need to be,
Right.
based off of like what happens. And we go through that session, we finish it, and I look at the pieces as where they are now, and I go,
Yes.
okay, given the natural momentum of everything, where does this end up going? And then we follow that story until its endpoint, or it transitions into something new, into a new
Yes.
scenario and a new situation, and then I plot that out and then repeat.
Okay. That is great. My mind is immediately going to like what I do, what Brian does. Let's say you got an actual play and you have like 6 sessions.
Here's the thing, I've
What do you do?
found that I cannot limit myself in that way.
Oh, so you'll never be like, oh, this is just like a 6-session miniseries.
Unless I have a story that I know has the bounds of that. So like when we
Okay.
did Voices in the Wood, I was like, this is going to be 5 episodes. And
Yes.
the things that I would do for Strangers in the Wood, I don't do for Voices in the Wood, because the game that we're playing is different.
Okay.
In that it has a set structure. It goes, you have, your 1, 2, 3, 4 like rounds of things.
Yeah.
Things happen in this order. Explore the story as it goes from there. And so within that structure, that's at that point I can then go, okay, we're doing 5 episodes of this loop. There we go.
Okay.
But for something that is more open-ended, like Strangers in the Wood, which is an adventure story, right?
Mhm.
Whispers in the Sea, which is also an adventure story.
Mhm.
While actually while we're actively recording
Yeah.
season 2 of Strangers in the Wood, I came into the season being like, okay, we're gonna have this many episodes, we're gonna have this many arcs, which can have this many
Right.
because I was trying to like, okay, I want to see if I can do this right for
Right.
Strangers in the Wood. And I think we went through that first arc, and I kept feeling like listening back to it, it doesn't feel like this, but as we were running it, I kept going like, I feel like we're rushing. I feel like we're
Yeah.
running through this because
Yeah.
we know there's a place we need to go.
Yeah.
Where otherwise I think these players would be exploring a bit more,
Yeah.
like having like a bit more like interactions and like just like testing the waters to see what would happen. We were rushing towards this thing that I knew that we had to get to, and I hated that feeling.
That feeling is so real though, because I do miniseries and it is like, hey, we have to get from A to B, and I won't. I'll plan beats, but how you get to B is all up to you guys. But we do need to get to B.
Exactly.
So there is that in all miniseries. There's always like, I think Brennan Lee Mulligan was like, it's the timer that makes this an actual play. When they were talking about editing and stuff, I was like, yep, that's always on my mind about just like.
Yeah, because you gotta, it's very easy to like let things linger for too long. And I will say very early on in my like GMing thing, like there are times where I feel like, oh man, I think I let this conversation go on a little too long.
Yeah.
But that was under the framework and thought that this oh god, I can't believe I'm about to say something so fucking cliche.
Say it.
The story for me is the journey, not the destination.
It's the journey. It's the story.
Right? It's like right, and like in at least again, I feel like I have the most fun when I've allowed players to explore the space and then they do something I didn't expect, which completely changes the entire story.
That is one of the best parts of TTRPGs.
Exactly. And
yes, exactly.
Within the structure of, okay, we're doing this miniseries, we got 5 episodes, I feel like I can't do my favorite part.
Yeah. No, I know, but you definitely still can. Like, because I understand what you're saying. The electric state is about travelers on a journey, and I tell them at session 0, hey, you have to get to B, but the story is in between A and B. Like, we're gonna get to B. You got to get to San Francisco, whatever. We're gonna get there. But like episodes like 2 through 5, the meat is everything that happens in between. and you guys can do whatever you want. That's what people want to hear. Those tension points and like how you get to be and like
Mhm.
arguing and all that good stuff, all that character drama. Like that's the journey part. And it can happen, but it is kind of, there is points where you have to think like a showrunner too. And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, okay, you guys, we're gonna take a break here. So we're gonna
Yeah.
cut off this conversation. I want you guys to continue, but we do have to. So there is
Yeah.
that too. But it's a fine
Yeah.
balance. It's a fine
'Cause
balance. Yeah.
yeah. And basically what I ended up deciding right for the second season
Yeah.
is I had my original like I still have those numbers as like great goals,
Okay.
whatever.
Okay.
Um but I don't work for someone who can limit what
True.
I do. And
We limit
so
ourselves. Yeah.
exactly. I like all of those limitations I would put are purely limitations on myself. If
Mhm.
this season goes 50 episodes, who cares?
Yeah.
No one's gonna
Yeah.
be upset with me, right? And so like yeah, basically like that's what it ended up like. I had to take a step back and go, okay, we don't need to rush it. We don't need to finish this arc in one because it also is
Yeah.
because for the second season we've altered our recording sessions where
Mm.
now we do monthly like 7-hour long sessions where
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
we'll do two recording sessions, a
For like
3 hour break, another 3 hour
come
one.
back. Okay.
Exactly. And so that way they felt consistent to each other as far as like tonally and emotionally. And
Yeah.
also it's less time for us to like it's easier to schedule one day for 7 hours than
Yes.
multiple weeks in a row for
Yeah.
the same, whatever. And so
Is it easier to pick up on pacing with that? Like to control that?
it is a bit it is, and I
Okay.
think it's also like this is in combination with I've just become a better GM over
Okay.
time, right?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
starting off in Strangers in the Wood 4 years ago, my pacing isn't as good as it is now 4 years later, having done multiple series, have done more actual plays and so on and so forth. Um and so while I think I could do it, because even like listening like back to that first arc, it's like that
Yeah.
arc's great, and it does feel a little bit like okay, they know that there's a thing that needs to go to, so they're
Yes.
limiting what they're doing.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it's still good, right?
Yeah.
The
Solid.
only reason why we're changing back to something more free is because I would have more fun if we did.
Yeah. And you got to have fun too.
Exactly.
I think
So
that's like you found your spot and you're like, I live here. This is good for me.
this is my spot, and
Yeah.
hey, if anybody else wants to hang out at my place, they can.
Come on over. Speaking of, because we talked about it a little bit before we started like recording and going live.
Mhm.
I want to know more because it's not talked about enough. Just the nitty gritty behind the scenes of casting and that entire process and being intentional about who's going to be playing. There
Yeah.
are certain games that are just electric state is bleak, and there are certain lines and veils that are usually not crossed
Mhm.
that are
Mhm.
here that are kind of explored because it's like The Last of Us, you know what I mean? It's like it's rated R for sure. So what do you do in terms of cast? Do you stick with that same group? Do you branch out and find new people? Like what's that like for you?
Yeah, so when I started Tales Yet Told, like I said, I chose people that I knew because
Right.
I wasn't a part of the actual play space. Yeah, I wasn't part of the broader TTRPG space, and I wanted to play a game with people I had played a game with
Mhm.
before and people that I felt comfortable with. Since then, I've played with so many more people.
Yeah.
I think the first broadening of it was I had a series. The streamed portion of Tales Yet Told was called Prayers in the Static, which we
Okay.
did sci-fi stories that all took place in the same setting
Yeah.
that we were building up over multiple games that we were playing. Similar to what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
but more explicitly sci-fi. And I met like so many people. Like my current roommate right now is someone that I met doing that.
Oh, snap. Nice.
Yeah. And like genuinely, I think the way that I started making more connections with people was by playing
Mhm.
this game with all these different people, where it was primarily people that were closer to our sphere that we had seen perform before, or that
Yeah.
my co-producer at the time, co-creator, Ibrahim, like people that he knew or people that he had seen, and we casted from that.
Mhm.
And since then, since we've moved away from streaming and are back where I'm primarily doing, the podcast,
Yeah.
um, I primarily cast from people that I know, and I
Gotcha.
primarily cast from people that I've played with before.
Mm.
I know people who love playing with people that they've never played with before, where
Yeah.
they love
Yeah.
putting out casting calls
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
meeting people that way, and still going through a vetting process of, okay,
Yes. Yeah.
you've
Yeah. Yeah.
applied, let's check your socials, let's make sure you're not a dingbat with
Well,
like with the worst possible
yeah.
vibes ever,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
um and and still meeting people that way. And when it comes to like, I think what you said about like intentionality does matter, right?
Mm.
Know the story that you are trying to tell,
Yes. Yeah.
and trying to find the people who you think are going to fit that vibe, and people
Mm.
who are going to bring the perspective that you're looking for, or you think could be like an interesting layer
And
to that story.
respect the guidelines, respect the tone,
Exactly.
especially. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, um like, yeah, I know, like, I think there are a bunch of people with a bunch of different like ways in which they do it. I will speak for the way in which I do it.
Mm.
um I primarily, so I do have my core cast, which is Gus,
Yeah.
Hilda, and Marcy, and that's primarily because that's who I started off with.
Yeah.
And like, the main setting that we're currently playing in would not exist without them. It does have the disadvantage, and by disadvantage, I mean this in like a very kind of playful
Right.
way, is that they are all white. They yeah, no, and like,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I started Tales Yet Told without being in the tabletop RPG space, and primarily pulled from people that I had known in my life,
Yeah.
being a person who went to predominantly white high school, predominantly white college institution. The vast majority of people that I had played the game with or knew to such a degree that I felt comfortable making art with them were white. And that is just an unfortunate truth about,
Yes. It's
right?
very much. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's since then, I've thankfully met so many people from all different walks of life,
Mm.
from
Mhm.
all different ethnicities, cultures, religions, identities, whatever. And I've gotten to play with so many new people, and Tales Yet Told has moved to having much more diverse casting for
Yeah.
our other series. And I hope that my goal is for us to do a more longer form series similar to something like Strangers in the Wood or
Yeah.
Whispers in the Sea, with a primarily, if not all, BIPOC cast.
Yeah.
Um, Making things takes time.
Yeah.
is
No.
currently
This.
is currently where I'm at on that. But we do have
Yeah.
like our ongoing series, Our Lives in the Wood, which I do
Mm.
primarily try to keep as being mostly, if not all, BIPOC cast,
Mm.
myself included in that cast, obviously,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is the only thing keeping core Tales Get Told from being an all white thing. But
Yeah.
um but when it but the reason why I moved to wanting to bring more people in that weren't just that core group of people that I knew from my
Mm.
personal life
Yeah.
was because I was meeting so many amazing people who were bringing so many new perspectives and so many different styles of storytelling and so many other influences from their lives, that it just only continued to make the stories that we told bolder, more colorful, more
Yeah. Yeah.
exciting, more nuanced.
Yeah.
That like it like, I will always suggest that people should look beyond the people that they're currently playing with to try to
Yes.
find more people.
Yes.
That of course doesn't always mean that, hey, every project you should do should always have new people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it does, it because storytelling is there needs to be trust in what we do.
Yes,
There's
exactly.
a vulnerability in what we do. And so I'm
Yeah.
not saying pick every person who you see on social media and be
You
like,
really
hey, I need you in
can't.
a game.
You really can't.
Get to, but genuinely get to know the people
Mm.
that are outside of your spaces and
Hmm.
bring them in and create and like build community with them and share your skills together and tell stories together.
Hmm.
Um,
Have you?
because that only makes
Yeah,
it better, in my opinion.
I agree with you there. Have you ever had any? One thing that I've learned this year is to trust my gut more
Hmm.
when with casting,
Hmm.
and that even if it's an orange flag, and it seems harsh, but even if it's an orange flag and not a red flag,
Hmm.
still can't be like. And
No, absolutely.
and that could just be like, oh, you don't have the right mic or something. There's like so many barriers to entry. There's
Mhm.
scheduling is like the biggest one. And then past scheduling, they have to have the right technology too, because it is also like it's an audio format. I do need you to have a certain caliber of mic. I'm not
Yeah.
saying get $600 mic, but like a certain, but,
Yeah.
and then there's like, oh, maybe I do vibe check sessions with new players and I go, let me just see how you play and see if you're just let me see how you do it. And then I saw like, okay, this person kind of just like took themselves out of the story and then just like sat back while story moved to one scene and then you just kind of stayed there. And then I go, oh, dang, like you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm watching stuff like that,
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay, are you collaborating? Are you talking to other people? And it's like not a red flag. Like I would play with you in something that's super, that's
Yeah.
a home game or anything like that. But with these games, we do have to be like a little bit more strict. So that's why I'm like, even orange flags, I can't let in.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think like there comes to, as a producer making
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are the person that ends up deciding, okay, what is the line of quality that we're looking for from like a
Mm.
sound
Yeah.
perspective, right? And like um something like someone having like a mic that is like it works, but would be like noticeably worse in quality
Yes.
than other people's was like, yeah, sometimes like it sucks, right? Because
Yeah.
it does create a barrier into entry, right? For like some
Mm.
people just can't afford a better mic, but
Yeah.
also like sometimes that means that you're not going to be able to be in the thing, and that does suck.
Yeah. It's
um
unfortunate.
and that's just like one other thing, right? Like sometimes there are people who are more shy, right? Who end up moving to the background. And if you as a producer, like,
Yeah.
hey, that you're not a bad person. I'm looking
Yes.
for a different vibe for this. Like
Yeah.
that's just kind of how
It happened.
productions are, right?
Hmm.
And it's I'm trying to think if I've
Have you ever had to be that strict with people where you're like, oh, you're almost there, but not quite. And unfortunately,
I'm trying,
because I've had people who are like 90% there. And
yeah.
I'm like, oh, man.
I think thankfully this isn't something I've had to deal with, and it's because I
Mm.
don't do open castings, and
Okay. Yeah.
I'm usually only pulling from people whom I've already played with.
Yes. Yeah.
or- and it's not like I'm actively looking for people to play with. It's
Mm.
just like as I'm playing with them, or out something pings, I'm like, this is a person I want to play with later. I'm just gonna watch
Yes.
like
You just
that.
feel it.
Right. And so usually that's not an issue that I've come to, but I do know my friends who do open castings and
Mm.
things of that nature. Sometimes there are things that, and it's like, and I wish there was like a list, right? It's like, hey, make sure you have XYZ and it's going to make you look better for,
Yeah.
producers, right? There isn't just that, because it's going to come down to each individual production is looking for something specific. And that's sometimes hard as a producer to make those choices, because
Yes.
sometimes there is someone you really really want to play with, but you're just like, logistics wise this isn't going to work from a scheduling, a technical side, like whatever
Yes.
that is. And you try to find other ways to interact with them and maybe hope in the future that situations change so that you can actually play with them.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes people have like a headset mic, and I'm like, hey, that's great for like a one-shot home game or live streaming it,
There's
and
going to be a
that's
6
fine.
episode thing. It's going to be
Yeah.
fully sound design. It's
Yeah. This is
noticeable.
yes. Do you feel that kind of is there that kind of higher pressure of knowing that like, hey, this is not just like a casual, we're not just setting a mic in the middle of a table.
Hmm.
Like this is something a little bit more than that. Like it's you like you're saying it's still freeing, but at the same time, like we're
Yeah.
still putting a lot on the back end.
Yeah, I think I mean, probably unconsciously I think of it, right? And it
Mm,
probably has some bearing over whenever that switch flips in my brain or not.
yeah,
Whenever I am like passively vetting people for like future games, right?
yeah.
Um and I think there is like I'm trying to think of like if I knew somebody who I wanted to play with, but I knew didn't have the technical resources to be like the quality that I'm looking for, would I say no?
Well,
Probably.
even if it hasn't happened, like, do you know what you would do?
Yeah, that's like I don't know because I've never really thought about it before. And I think part of it comes from my particular mode of making actual plays.
Okay.
I don't view God, there probably is a line whenever someone's mic would sound bad enough where I go, "No, we can't do that."
Right,
But
right.
I think I don't have such a hard line on that technical aspect that if there was someone I really wanted to play with, where I would say no. And I say that partially
Yeah.
because season 1, Strangers in the Wood, Hilda's
Right.
using headset microphone because again, we weren't
Yeah,
expecting
no,
to be
this
where we
is
are, right?
you guys are just coming together.
We were just coming together, and like once
Yeah.
we were like, oh, this is the thing that we're doing now. Everybody got microphones.
Right, right, right.
Everybody
Yeah, you
like we
learn.
right we learn. But like I don't know. There's God, man.
It's a hard one.
It would be hard.
It's hard
It'd
to
be really hard. I think if there was someone I really wanted to play with and they were just like, sorry, I can't do anything better than my headset microphone or these like shitty, I would probably mail them one of my spare
Really?
microphones and be like, just send it back. But again, I would
Okay.
only be
Okay.
playing with people that I trusted to a degree in which I would do that, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Because also like at that point, like I do just have like extra microphones since
I do
I've
also have just like
upgraded.
an extra
Right? Like exactly like since I've upgraded, I just have
Yeah.
microphones that I don't
Yeah.
use anymore. And so if I really wanted to play with someone, sending them a microphone would be not that big of a deal to me. Like it's more money that I have to spend, but I'm doing it so that I can have a good time with my friend, presumably. And
Yes,
so we
yes.
can tell a story together.
Okay.
Sure, why not?
Okay, so everybody listening, Kendrick Smith officially will send you a mic if you are good enough.
If we're good enough, if we genuinely have a
Yes.
good connection, and I'm like I want to sit down at a table with you.
Yes.
I want to play. Yeah, sure. Why not? Just send it back.
Yeah, I'll send you a PC.
I'll have your address.
Yeah, do you need a PC? Okay, you need a new PC.
Whoa.
Kendrick got
Okay.
you.
Wow. Okay. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have
Okay, never
extra
mind.
PCs
Oh,
lying around. I do have extra mics though.
Okay, cool. Another question I wanted to ask you about is crafting horror in actual plays. I love horror as a storytelling medium. So,
Same.
for example, quick question: have you played Dread? Because I think Dread is the best.
Dread is the
Jenga.
Jenga block. Yes, I have played Dread.
I think that's the best horror mechanics ever in
It's
any
good.
TTRPG because it's literally all you have to think about is pulling a block and nothing else. And I think that there's other horror games that have all these numbers and you're still crunching, and then you start thinking about the number crunching, and then you're not scared anymore because I think like psychologically you're thinking about math now. If you only have to think about pulling a block and all this anyway, Dread is amazing.
Dread is
But
great. Dread is
I
great.
love telling horror stories in actual play. I love grounded. Like I'm not scared of monsters and beasts like in D&D or something like that. But like in Get Out, like if someone's trying to like if I go to the sunken place, that's that's
Yeah.
horrifying.
Yeah.
You just like someone's living in your body and you can still see like that type of horror. Or like Sinners is another good example of horror done well, where it's about like culture and things that like that have just happened in your past. So
Right.
love that. So what do you think about horror in actual play and like and crafting those stories?
Yeah, I think when it comes to storytelling, I naturally bend towards horror,
Okay.
even when I'm not actively trying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that comes from the way in which I view horror, or at least express it, comes down to like detail
Mm.
and like the specifics of certain details
Yeah.
that can make something mundane feel horrifying or feel alien in a
The
way,
little
just
uncanny valley beats that you.
right, like just like the
Yeah.
way you describe something. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I tend towards horror for game mastering specifically because I become fascinated, like it's
Yeah.
it's an unconscious like thing where it's like I was just running a game of Kids on Brooms the other day
Mm-hmm.
for a stream, and and there was this moment where I was playing with Super Dylan, and they were viewing like this visage of their grandmother who didn't have a face,
Oh snap.
and had been like communicating with them mostly through like hand gestures or like weird like ripples in their
Yeah.
face to show
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff. And there was a moment where it was like, okay, the grandmother's going to say something now, and it was like I could have just been like, oh, they have a mouth, right? But it came down to like, okay, how does this thing now get a mouth, and then having to think through like what that looked like and
Oh,
then describing it, it became horrifying.
I was like, kids on brooms. That's not supposed to be horrifying.
Right, well, they weren't actually, we were using the system, they were
Okay. Okay.
kids.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
but it can be right where it was like
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it came down to like, okay, I'm imagining like the mouth opening up, right, and like just mouth and talking, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
that became, okay, well, how does that happen? It could just fade in, but like I want detail. What if the skin starts to stretch and begin to pull and break, and then you see
Perfect.
how it becomes
Yeah.
horrifying? And that
Horrifying.
wasn't intentional when I first started
Your brain
actually,
just
but
went to it so
my brain
comfortably.
just went to it, exactly, right? And maybe it's just like my brain is comfortable in it, so I just veer towards it as default.
Yeah.
um
What about horror, like just like scratches that itch for you though, versus like playing like a whimsical game or something, just like, hey, now we're playing like a Studio Ghibli and it's all fun and
Here's the thing, but that's also horrifying. Name a Ghibli movie that doesn't have body
okay.
horror in it,
Well,
right?
we did just talk about what's the Spirited Away, and someone explained it watching it for the first time, and they're like, "This movie's a horror film." I was like, "What are you talking about? No, it's Ghibli." And then she started explaining the scenes again. I was like, "Oh, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
actually."
all it's all wow, it's all horror and about how war transforms
Oh
transforms, and
yes,
like the
yes, yes.
horrors of like industrialization and the lack of
Oh,
caring
oh
for one's
yes.
right. And so it's like it's
But then we also have Kiki's
everything
Delivery
has
Service, though.
right. And we have Kiki's delivery service where a small girl almost falls like 30 feet
Okay,
onto the
okay.
ground.
Now I see where you're going.
Right, exactly, where it's like there's like horror can exist in any moment in our life depending on what we're focusing on. And I
Okay, okay,
think that's what my brain latches on, to the
okay.
perspective of like what makes this otherwise mundane moment feel tense. Tension is a thing that I love playing with,
Love
especially when it
tension.
comes to horror.
Yes.
And like a lot of that comes down to like even like pacing yourself in the way you describe a thing that everyone already knows is horrifying,
Yeah.
but like how you pace that reveal, and again the
Mm,
details that you focus on. And I love getting reactions out of players whenever
love
I'm
it.
describing something.
Love it.
And it's like a big reason, like, hey, conversations and safety tools with your players and being able to learn how to navigate situations, a
That's another
it's a
skill right
great
there.
thing, but also comes down to trust, right?
Yes.
Because I play with people that I've known for years or have really good connections with, know exactly what they're looking for.
Mm,
It creates this ability for us to be able to play in horrifying spaces
yeah.
and know that we are still safe with each other. And so it allows for moments
Mm,
of grandmother's skin peeling back, or
yes.
describing bodies that have been hollowed out and spiders filling them and moving. And it's
Okay.
like stuff like that I love.
Yeah. And how do you balance those moments where you're like, it's high tension, and then you have to go back because you can't stay like
Oh
taut,
no. It comes down to
you know?
levity and those small moments.
Okay,
Lots
okay,
of my games end up being very comedic
okay.
in many ways. And I think this is a particular skill for me that I will say people have pointed out where they not to be, yeah, people say they love this thing about
People,
me.
yeah, people love me. By the way, just want to let you know.
People love me, by
And
the way.
here's a few things why. Here's a few reasons why.
But I love flowing from comedy into drama, and I find that
Yeah,
I can do so very easily.
yeah.
um and so it's that like finding, and truly it comes down to finding the moments in human interactions that are just
Mm,
funny, that
mm.
are just like, regardless of the situation,
Just
it's like
ridiculous.
sometimes someone reacting overly scared to a thing is just funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sometimes a coward revealing themselves as such in the most horrifying situation and like stammering over themselves as they
It's
back
hilarious.
away from a thing that they fear is scary and horror
And
and funny, right?
uh,
It can be all of these things at once.
is it? I kind of feel like comedy and horror kind of. I know this might sound weird, but I feel like they kind of live in the same
They
family,
do.
if that
I
makes sense.
I think so, because there is like it comes down to perspective.
Right.
Whatever you are focusing on in that moment will determine, is this thing that is funny or is this thing that's horrifying? If I am focusing on the scenario of a person being like a horrifying thing coming over them and like slowly clawing its way towards
Yes.
them, and I'm
Yeah.
focusing on that and that scenario, oh my god, that's horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm focusing on the oh my god, if I'm focusing on that, it's funny. And so it's like, and part of being part of like being a GM and developing that skill for how to move focus from the horrifying to the levity, and
Yes.
being
Yeah.
able to balance that out, is just a thing that you learn over time. Over, okay, and now we're going to focus on this thing, because this is
Okay.
a thing that's going to like
Yeah.
shifting the balance of power back and forth between like what has, you know.
I love that. I love that you
Yeah.
mentioned that because a great example is like what you said, like what you're focusing on. A
Mhm.
good example is Nope. Have you seen Nope?
Yes, yeah, yeah,
A
yeah,
good
yeah.
example is when they're getting sucked up into that monster's thing or whatever. The
Right.
sound design, what they used was screams from people on a roller coaster having fun. But because of how it's focused, it
Mhm,
sounds
mhm,
terrifying. And I was like,
mhm,
oh,
mhm.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't know the difference. Oh, those are screams for people having fun. But no, they're
No,
that.
it sounds
It's,
terrifying,
yeah, it
and
sounds terrifying. If
exactly.
I love that. I love that.
It's all the different, yeah, difference between horror and comedy is just context and what you're focusing on.
Exactly. Exactly.
And being able to balance that out truly just comes around in play, right? Play
Yeah.
around with what you focus on, you know.
Mhm.
Whether it be the funny way that someone's voice cracks as like a scary thing happens,
Mhm.
or whether it be like just I think or whether it be like the weird way that limbs move as they're
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
reanimating, or like whatever it is, like it can just delivery and focus is
Delivery
kind
and
of
focus.
practice, play around with it, figure out what works best for you.
Do you think that helps with the longevity of a campaign?
Oh
So that
yeah.
you can go like, because sometimes I've heard like horror is like good for like 6 to 12 sessions.
Mhm.
But I think if you could play it right, you could probably go for as long as you want because you're not at this heightened sense of horror
Mhm.
every session 100% of the time.
Yeah.
That sounds stressful.
Yeah, because I mean, what Strangers in the Wood goes 29 sessions, somewhere
Oh,
around there,
oh,
and
that's a good amount.
it has a roller coaster. It
Yes,
goes
yeah,
from
yeah.
high tension to almost like player conflict, like high drama, to
Yes.
like weird sci-fi horror, to like light conversations over a meal,
Hmm.
to like, oh my god, we just stole this car, to oh my god, my body's changing in a way that I wasn't expecting. Like it,
Hmm.
like, because you can move through tones and move and like focus on different things and allow for high intensity moments as well as slow
Yeah.
contemplative ones, you can get so many more episodes out of. You get so much longevity and like
Yeah.
people's tolerance over the tone
Mhm.
because you're giving them palate cleansers, because you're giving them
Yes.
something new, and because they get to experience a range of emotions rather than just one emotion all the time.
Yeah. Here's the anime beach episode. I know you guys need it. Here you go.
Exactly.
In my opinion, I think that the best systems for this are rules light. Do you think it can work with heavier, like crunchier systems?
That's a good question. I haven't played a lot of like I haven't played like Call of Cthulhu
Mhm.
or something like that for horror. I imagine that I think the horror comes maybe a little differently because
Mm.
I guess I've done horror in like games like D&D, right, which
Mm.
are like on like the rules heavier side and a little
Mm.
crunchier, and I think the way to include the mechanics of the game and the rolling and the math and the horror of it is
Yeah.
grounding those numbers into a reality, right?
Oh,
Making
okay.
sure that stakes are set.
Mm.
Because I think a lot of the ways in which tension gets pulled from like, okay, I gotta roll dice and do math is because yeah, you're thinking about rolling the dice, doing the math, figuring out the result. But if you know from the get-go
Mm.
what number or what result or what
Yeah.
potential negative results are, that makes the process feel like waiting to know what
Yes. Yeah.
happens. And
Yeah.
that creates the tension of, okay, fuck, I need to roll, I need to get like a 16 or 17 in order to do this. And you see Brennan Lee Mulligan does this so well in Dimension 20, where he
Mm.
often puts the stakes of, okay, here's the bad thing that's going to happen. Here's the number you need to roll. Here's your modifier, which means
Yeah.
you need to roll this
This.
in
Yeah.
order
Yeah.
to succeed.
He's like, you need a 10.
Exactly, right?
Roll in the box of doom.
And so sometimes that's asking that's setting the stakes, right? Okay, here's the situation you're in. Here's the role you need to make. What's your
Mm.
modifier in that role? Get that early math out of the way, right?
Mm.
Okay, you already know the modifiers. The GM, someone else can, not just the GM, but other people can also chime in. We're all a part of this together,
Right.
Of like, okay, if you have that, that means you need to roll XYZ, or like, oh, that's going to go against this roll, right? And so
Yeah.
so the GM's like, okay, I'm going to roll their die first. Okay, I know the result you need to hit. Here's the number you need to roll. That makes it a single die roll, and the tension of a single die roll to keep up that horror, I think, is a tool potentially to help keep those mechanics a part of that story.
I agree. I think that does, because those are like high tension moments where everybody's like, oh my God, I need to roll 12 or blah, blah, blah. Do you think that there's something to be said in like mechanics happening and then getting out of the way quickly though? If you're just rolling like, hey, here's 2d6 and you just gotta roll. That's why I like freely, because you have to roll like a pool of d6 or something.
Right. And then you get that, and then it's like, okay, this many hits, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I think potentially, and now I'm realizing that we're framing this around the idea of like a traditional TTRPG experience where there's like a party of people going on an adventure. There's a game master who's setting up a world, so on and so forth, which are more traditional games like Call of Cthulhu, Dungeons and Dragons, so on and so forth. But there are other horror games that are one game in particular, I will say, like Abnormal by Avery Alder. We play it in Strangers in the Wood, where it's a body horror game where one person is playing the person and the other person is playing the horror that is changing them, and like you're rolling dice to like there's like like a fairly in-depth system. It's not like very like it's not got like a bunch of mechanics, but it's hard to play that game and divorce the story from the roles and like the stages of the game, the mechanics of the game. So the mechanics never really pull away from it, but the mechanics are also in tune with what the stakes are, and because of that, the horror is always maintained because you can look at the board that you set up with the dice and the cards and go, okay, this is what's happening. I'm this many die away from the bad thing happening, or like so, and so it allows for the players to still be engrossed in the stakes and horror of the story while not getting away from it. And so I really think it comes down to the framework, both
Okay.
that of the game and that the framework that the table puts onto the game as well. Um
That sounds like a
and
system that's like where it's intrinsic, like the mechanics are
yes,
made for this. You need them.
yes,
They
it's
can't really get out of the
intentional.
way. Okay. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
exactly. But for games where like the mechanics aren't necessarily right, we're going back to like a Call of Cthulhu or like a Delta Green, or I've never played Delta Green, so I don't know if that's true. Uh, um, I mean, I guess I don't know. I tend to be as a GM very mechanically aligned with my storytelling, and by that I mean I love the focus of mechanics because
Yes.
again, I'm always thinking about the two stories being told. The one that's at the table and then the story we are telling with the game that we're playing at the table. And so when we switch to talking about mechanics and the stakes of those, in my mind, we've never this isn't taking away from the horror or taking away from the story. This is shifting focus to the second story that's being told, which
Okay.
is the
Okay.
writer room putting the game together. And that's my particular focus. And so I'm never particularly looking for the game mechanics to peel away so that I don't have to see them, because I, as a game master, want to be using them to help shape our story. And that's my
Okay.
particular
Okay.
rules focused autism that I have.
Okay.
Like
So
I like rules. And
okay.
so
Okay. So
I
you like them.
I do.
You like okay. Okay.
And so it ends up changing, like my actual plays end up being very like I don't like removing table talk because
Oh. Okay.
and our table talk tends to be very focused, right? But it tends to be about mechanics and about
Yeah.
players talking about the game in such a way that it still affects the game and story that we're telling.
Still
and
moving the story forward and
it's still
all
moving
that.
the story forward
Okay.
because it's moving our perspective of the story forward, and we're the people telling the story, if that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like I, as a game master and as a producer, I like keeping those things in because I think that's what makes our story good. It's what
Okay.
makes
Okay.
our story what it is. And it makes it ours. But that's not how everybody wants to run their
Right.
game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there is a certain degree that I think some games are better for pulling back than others,
Yeah.
and your mileage may vary depending on what is the thing that you are looking to focus on.
Right. So do you listen to actual plays yourself?
Oh
Like
yes, I was listening to two right before this.
okay. Are you someone who's like, "Oh, I want to hear the rules in the table talk." Do you also like to
Yes.
hear it as well as okay,
Yes,
so you like to hear it.
I do like to hear it, and I know that that is not. I know that that's not a commonly held belief.
Yeah.
And like I get it. I understand why people want to focus purely on the story, and I think that tends to come from, um, and I mean this like truly in the most neutral way possible,
Yes, yeah,
and
yeah.
not putting like any value judgment on it. But I think it comes from a people, a people. It tends to come from people wanting the thing that they're making or the thing that they're listening to sound familiar and sound like other things. So like they want it to sound like an audio drama, or they want
Audio
it to
drama,
sound like
yep.
they're reading an audio book, or they want to sound like they're like watching a movie, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. That's a stylistic preference, and requires a peeling away a lot of the play and game aspects and the table aspects to leave
Yeah.
just the story, which is a totally valid way to make and listen to it. But I personally prefer leaving the play and table aspects of
Yeah.
it because that's part of the story for me
Yeah,
and what
yeah.
I like hearing.
If you take that out, is it still considered an actual play if you take out the actual
Oh, boy.
play?
Oh, yikes. This
Oy, oy vey.
the question that I don't think anyone will ever have a great
An
answer
answer
to,
to
because I think we're still trying to figure out the bounds of what is considered actual play. I would say, yeah, that's still actual play. Why wouldn't it be?
it's still okay, okay. You still say it is.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, but I do have actual play questions about
Yeah.
I do have it. But quick question in horror, do you like, because Stranger in the Woods, well, at least when I started, it was kids. Is there
Yes.
something about like horror and children that kind of like scratches an itch for you, that versus like, oh, these are now full grown adults? Is there
Yeah.
some?
I I I'm one of the few people who are very comfortable with putting children in dangerous situations for a game. Because
Yes,
because I know that it's a thing that a lot of people like, and a reason why we continuously put it on any of our content warnings for Strangers in the Wood,
right,
because
right.
there's so many people who are like, I don't want to hear
No
about
harm,
kids
just
getting
yep.
hurt. I don't
Yeah.
want, and like, totally understandable.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up reading a series of unfortunate events where those kids are in the worst possible danger almost at all times,
Every single time.
every single
Every
time.
horrifying.
And like, I don't know, yeah, there's something about, so I think it kind of comes down to, of I love playing in the space of like the mid late teen early like early young adult hood, that
I hear you.
I
Hmm.
love playing in. And I think part of it is children are allowed to be children are allowed to be vulnerable and flawed in ways that we don't typically allow adults to be, and children are
Yeah.
tend to also be way more honest about the way
Yeah.
that they feel
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
ways that adults don't tend to be. And so when it comes to telling stories with them, you can
Mm.
do a lot of the high drama, deeply emotional kind
Mm.
of exploration in storytelling, and allowing for that don't get masked by the like the face of adulthood of
Right.
and so it allows for us to tell, like, Strangers in the Wood, yes, is about like a 16-year-old and a 7-year-old with their talking animal
Yeah.
friend that they meet in the woods. um that story is also about what is it like to be a foster, like the complex dynamic of like being foster siblings, both having received various forms
Yeah.
of trauma and abuse throughout having to live within America's foster care system.
Which is
It
a
is,
horror in itself.
which is a horror in itself. It's
Yeah.
also about living in a world that very particularly exploits children in a way to perpetuate its
Mm. Mm.
it's like weird like social stratification that it has. It is also about what is it like for a younger sibling to watch their older sibling go through a change in themselves that they don't personally understand, and then
Yeah.
what is it like being an older sibling who's trying to understand this important aspect about your gender and sexuality, and then having to uh translate that to a child who doesn't necessarily understand and is
Yeah.
also degrees removed from you because you are foster siblings and have not
Hmm.
lived most of your life together. And then it's also about what is it like living in a, like, right, it's all
So many
these,
layers.
there are so many things about the way in which our society has views children in this very weird space of
Mm.
these people that are not allowed their own autonomy, but are expected to grow into themselves at some point despite never really being given the tools or opportunity to become an
Yeah.
individual
Yeah.
outside of the grounds, the like, there's there's
There's
something
so
about
much.
there's something about the way in which being in that space and that age that ends up creating the adults that we end up having to interact with at
Mm.
any point in time that I find is a fun place to explore and imagine what is it in our lives that creates the people who we are,
Mm.
and how what world do we want children to grow up in to become the adults that can be themselves and be free of the traumas in which we currently live. And sometimes that means extrapolating the horrors we currently live in and then placing it up in a story where my players have to interact with, and then come out the other side and go, okay, what did we learn about ourselves
Yes, I love
through
that.
that?
And I think that's why one of my favorite, well, actually, my favorite Ghibli film is called Only Yesterday. And it's
Mm,
so simple. And it's just about a girl. She's on a train ride back to the country, and she just starts having memories about when she was like 6 or 7. And you
mhm,
start to see like the little things that like stamped out. the rambunctiousness of who she was back then
Yeah.
into the like kind of docile adult that she turned into. And
Yeah.
there's something about like bittersweet and kind of sad about like, oh, who you could have been if there wasn't an adult who like said, no, you can't do that.
Yes.
Like, oh,
Yes.
oh, you want to be an actor, you want to be in a play? No. Even though
Right.
you're really good at it because you have responsibilities to do something else. And I think
Exactly.
you could tell like these, I mean, being a child is scary.
Being a
Just in
child is
itself.
scary. It's this world
Yeah.
is not built for America has not built a world in which children feel comfortable to exist.
Oh, America, yes. Yeah.
And it
100%.
is other people and cultures figured it out forever ago, and then who knows why that got stamped out, and we've created a world in which children are constantly victimized, exploited,
Yes.
and and used to the gains of other people, typically adults.
Mhm.
And especially like in Strangers in the Wood, I like that's a lot of what that story is engaging with, when we weren't necessarily intending that up front, but when I was building the world, like when I was building the world, and through this the process of critical world building, of creating the physics and geography of the world, and then from there going, okay, if this is true, then what else is true?
Right.
What does this mean about the world and the society? And having tried to recreate a like an extrapolated American culture
Yes.
from the 80s, and then putting it onto this world, there were so many things that then revealed themselves as like, well, if that's true, then this has to be true, and then this is like true about this experience. How do we explore that, and how does that manifest in this world?
Lots of like domino effects.
Exactly.
Just building up on each other.
Exactly.
Okay. What do you think people like about playing children in these roles? Like or like people love to play like Tales from the Loop or something like that. So
Yeah.
what is it about like playing children that adults love? What do you think?
I think there's a bit of a nostalgia, right? Of like sitting in a character and being able to pull on your own experience from your own childhood to flesh out like, oh, dynamics that I had with my friends or my siblings or my parents, responsibilities that I had, things that I wanted to try out that I never got to try out,
Yes,
the things that I was afraid of, right? It allows for this not always nostalgic, but this kind of self-analysis of the self, and like the ways in which your childhood shaped you, and things that tended to stick out, or things that even you wanted to explore, maybe a different version of a way your childhood could have been, or that someone's childhood might have been. I think there's also a sense of freedom, right? Of like talking like that, like children are allowed to be more honest
Yeah.
than adults are allowed to be, and so having that kind of emotional depth, and then being able to express that, and express fear and pain and betrayal in ways that can be genuinely cathartic, to be able to just express that, even if it isn't of yourself, right? Even if it isn't your own experience, but being able to, through acting, put yourself in that space and have that moment of, you know what, fuck you, adult who's been pushing me around and like, bullying me, and like, you know what, just fuck you.
Is this where the therapy in TTRPGs comes in?
I think
Is there something therapeutic about it?
Role-playing games can be therapeutic. Role-playing games aren't necessarily therapy.
Oh, right? For sure. Yeah.
Right. Thing like the act of role playing and sitting in another character and being able to, think through and experience a different person's perspective, which may then give you perspective of your own life, can be therapeutic. It can be cathartic to put yourself in a situation that that is similar, if not the same, from an experience that you've been in, and being able to stand up for yourself, or express a part of your identity that you haven't been able to express, or be able to play in that kind of like gender and sexual expression, or even being able to bring your own culture and history into a game and play that out in a way that is freeing, in a way that is liberating, can be therapeutic and cathartic. It is not therapy.
And game masters are not therapists.
Game masters, unless they
I know.
are a licensed
Unless they
therapist,
are.
are not your therapist.
Um, so do you think you could run games for adults? Is there anything that you would say up front? Well, like horror
I mean, I
games.
do.
No, I mean,
I do.
okay, no,
Strangers in the
I
Woods
know
was
you do,
happening to me. Yeah.
What do you think like the difference is? I guess that's a better question of like running this horror, telling this story with children versus telling, let's say you told that same story, but from the perspective of an adult. What would you say? Would there be any tricky situations you'd have to try to work your way around, or?
I mean, I think by its very concept, I couldn't do Strangers in the Wood. I couldn't do the story of Strangers in the Wood
Yeah.
with adults. I have and do tell stories within that same setting through the eyes of adults.
Right.
And yeah, I think the process of that is very different, right? Because you are engaging with a person who has a different relationship with their place in the world when you are running a game that uses that where adults are the main characters versus children as the main characters.
Yeah.
Adults tend to feel more capable than children do. The world in which they are in is built for them to learn to navigate. The world gives them the break and also puts them in positions where they have more agency to make changes and enact their will upon the world,
Right.
different than children who generally can't do a lot of those things. And so when you're running games for adults in horror, you have to think of it from the perspective of someone who generally feels competent in doing a thing, and the world is built for them to enact and have agency with that competency. And so the horror comes from different angles, right? It's usually making people who feel confident and feel like good, make them feel vulnerable, break
stripping
them
away
down,
stripping away that confidence. Yeah.
Right. You, in a lot of ways, you are stripping away the things that make them different from children.
Okay.
Where you're stripping away, like, oh, you thought you can do this? Well, the world is bigger and more horrifying than that.
Yeah.
You want to enact your own agency? No, you cannot do that because there's someone more big and powerful than you that is preventing you from doing that. You think you understand how the world works, but there is something more alien than you could possibly have comprehended. You are making adults feel like children and bringing them back to that base state of being able to be honest about their vulnerability.
Right. So you're kind of like just laying it all bare, making them naked in a sense. And it's kind of like, this is how children feel.
All the
like,
time.
Hey, you're like, how you feel now is like how kids feel, just scared, vulnerable. They feel tiny and small, like they can't enact any change.
Yes.
And so you kind of have to put that on to adults in order to tell like a successful like horror story with.
Or at least that's the horror. That's the kind of horror that I lean towards, right?
Okay,
there are probably other ways in which to do that. But I think the ways in which I tend to do it isn't like even explicitly that. Like, I'm not like, okay, guys, I'm going to make you feel like children, right? But like, I think that's the reality of what I'm doing a lot is stripping away is just stripping away the things that make adults feel like they have power and feel like they have control over their situation, which just happens to align with the way the world tends to make children feel.
Yes. And so it kind of works out in that way. How another question I have for you. So this is the big one. I wanted to tell you, and you have to give me the definitive answer.
Okay.
Should everyone start an actual play?
Should everyone start an actual play? No.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
No, I don't think everyone should. And that's not to say everyone, oh God, everyone can start an actual play.
They certainly can.
Everyone can do whatever they want. The question of should is hard here, right? The way, like, it's not that I think that there are people who aren't capable of it, but I think in the same process of doing anything, making any kind of art, starting any kind of project, you have to think of like, why are you doing this, right? If and if that why is good enough for you to justify putting in the work to doing it, then go ahead and do it, right? Every actual play that exists is not going to be for everyone. Everybody, right? And there's also, I don't want to put like a value judgment on like art has to be quote unquote good.
Because it's subjective.
That's subjective, right? How do we
Yeah.
determine who is good and what isn't, right? And so like the reason why I'm saying I don't think everyone should start an actual play is because like
What?
you have to answer the why for yourself, right? If your reason is just because like, hey, I just want to hang out with my friends, so on and so forth, right? Like shit is such a hard word.
I know, it's a hard one. It's a hard one.
I think if you want to start an actual play, go ahead and do it, but know why you're doing it and lean into whatever that is, because that's the only way you're going to have a good time doing it. If your reasoning is, well, I want to get big and famous and I want a bunch of money, I'm so sorry.
Oh God. Oh, that's the wrong business, my friend.
You're in the wrong business for that. However, if you're doing it because it will bring you, yeah, Violetta, this is very important. Yes, free. If you're doing it from that perspective, right? Like, sure, that's fine. That doesn't entitle anyone, or that doesn't entitle you to anyone listening to your thing. I think is ultimately what it comes down to, right? Whatever you're doing, for whatever reason, don't expect that people are going to listen to your thing, or it's going to blow up, or it's going to be this huge thing, or that anyone is going to care at all that you've done it.
I recently heard someone say like, oh, I mean, it's everybody has the potential to become the next Critical Role, and I was like,
that's not true.
That's not true. First of all, it's very not true. But I mean, second, they were all like voice actors. They're in the business already. Like
exactly.
They didn't come. They weren't like you and me. So there's that as well. And but what is an actual play? And like.
What is an actual play? That's a great question.
In its most bare form, like technical sense, it is people playing a game and putting it. I feel like it's people playing a game and putting it online. Like you're playing a game.
Yeah, people recording their experience playing a game and putting it online. Usually in its most an audio or visual format.
Yes. Okay.
And that is what it is at its most base. You could then take it a step forward, maybe, and say it is people playing a tabletop RPG for because they're and this is actually a question that I've been thinking of. Like, if someone found a way to, and not found, like, not people have done this, right? Yeah. Sorry, my roommate closed the door and now she's upset about it.
Oh no. Do you need to go open it?
No, because my roommate closed it for a reason.
Okay.
What was I saying?
What's the question you've been thinking about with actual plays?
Oh yes. If someone were to,
you have a child. You have to take care of your child.
Okay, Violetta. Okay, cool. If someone if someone played a board game and added role play elements to it and then record it, would that be actual play? And I'm thinking yes. I think it would be.
Okay. Because it's technically a tabletop game?
Not even necessarily, because it's just a game, right? It's
okay.
Like question. If actual play can include people playing a TTRPG, recording it, editing it out, and cutting away all forms of gameplay and only leaving the story and posting that, and that is still actual play, right? The tabletop game was a necessary aspect to create the play, but if its mechanics and the play of the mechanics isn't important isn't like a structural foundation of being like, if you take this away, then it's not actual play anymore. Then it doesn't matter what game that you play if it can create the same kind of narrative.
Why do I feel like this is like a spider's web?
Oh,
trying
true,
to
right? Which is like gets to like like where does the bounds of what is and is an actual play like actually lie? Is a thing that I think we're still finding out.
right.
Um,
And then
uh,
we can't answer what is a good actual play because that's different for everybody.
right,
But
exactly.
don't
Like, what's a good painting?
right. I feel like can't everybody agree though that we all want to see like have like good audio, right? Like we can all agree, be like, at least we want to hear everybody clearly.
Right.
Isn't there like base stuff we all kind of like agree that's like kind of vital to producing a quote unquote good actual play?
I think I would say that we probably all have standards for certain technical qualities of something for us to say, I was able to listen to this and enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as like, listenable quality like audio, right?
Mm,
um Something being edited down, right? Allow something to be more accessible so people can listen to it and engage with it and be able to say, this is a thing that I enjoyed. Is that a necessary thing for us to say that something is good? I think gets into the same area of like what makes a painting good, right? Of like, yeah, there are going to be different people who have different tools that are going to be more accessible to you
mm.
as far as like as an audience, right? Where
Yes,
like
yeah.
accessibility comes down to how familiar is this thing to something else that I have listened to
Yeah.
or have engaged with, and how easy is it for me to be able to connect to it in
Okay.
that way. um
What's the next level then? And what can we say? What is a polished actual play? Like the
I
stuff that
I would
like
say
my
polished. I think
okay.
polished would be. I think polished is a better word than necessarily good, because polish comes down to, okay, this is polish is a lean towards accessibility
Mm,
and quality, right? Of being able to, okay, have other people be able to listen to this and be able to engage with it on their terms,
yeah.
and also like, and then there's like the next level of polish where it comes to like, okay, this is now no longer just broadly accessible. This is now elevating
Mm,
aspects of it by bringing new layers that aren't necessary to the most base form, right? Of having something that was recorded and then posted. This then includes like cutting down to increase pacing. This
right.
includes sound design of like adding this textual quality, something that isn't necessary for it to be
Yeah.
actual play, and not even necessarily necessary for it to be good, quote unquote
Or
good.
or yeah, polished.
But it does become like, okay, this is something that is more than just its base components.
Mm-hmm. So we have the definition of like the its various components, which is just like it's a game that you play, you post it online, and it's actual play. There you go.
Right. Yes.
And but we can put a little bit more on what is a polished actual play, where everybody can agree, like, okay, it's polished, then it has good audio. It's not just like the barest form, right? That
Yeah.
makes sense. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I would say we could probably mostly agree
Mm,
what aspects of an actual play
make it
would make something polished, right?
polished. Okay.
I think we can agree. I think we would all mostly agree on what those aspects are.
I think so. Okay. What else would make something polished? Is it just basically like the editing
I would go
and
as far as to say that in something that I don't think that we talk a lot about, of I
mhm.
would say create like intentional creative direction would go even further to making something feel more polished to me. Having a
Yeah, yeah.
unified vision over, this is the thing that we're telling, and how do all of these other
Oh,
aspects
yeah,
mold
100%.
together.
100%.
I
It's
think that's a level of polish that we don't tend to talk about in this space.
would you say like player chemistry as well is part of the polish?
Player chemistry is a part of the polish as well.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
There are like these more like ephemeral things of like,
Mhm.
they aren't like, you can't just turn a knob and this thing is better, right?
Right, right.
This comes through collaboration, this comes through
Mm.
communication, this comes through craft, and like both like on the technical and creative aspect of
Right,
it.
right, right. So there's
That
like the creative polish and the technical polish that come together
Yeah, yeah, because
to create.
that would include like performance, right, and like
Mm.
character choice, as far as a polish as well, of like having like really intentional and like very um like I think that we would probably say a game where people were just kind of like just doing whatever, having playing a game,
Yeah.
having fun, not
Yeah.
really thinking about the stories, themes, or anything necessarily, but still engaging with it as players. Like we would say, okay, this is good. I think if we generally would see a game where people are still kind of playing together in that same way, but like we know and like they're very explicit in, I have a vision for what this thing is, and
Yeah.
everything that I'm doing is moving this story in this direction, and we're paying close attention on like themes and like the pacing of the story, like story structure and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would probably say, well, this is more polished because it feels like a thing that was crafted
Right.
for a specific experience, which isn't necessarily to say that that thing's better than the other thing, but we
Right.
would say that this effort went into making this thing feel more like the way it is than something that was less effort put
Less
into
effort.
that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
craft.
And it's a tough. I guess if someone's going to ask you, like, "Hey, I want to make my own actual play," I
Mhm.
guess the first question would be like, "What's your intention? Like, what's the why?"
Yeah, why do you want to make the show?
That would be one question, and then would another be like, "Do you want it to be just an actual play, or do you want it to be more polished?" Is that another question that you ask?
Yeah,
Because then you're like, "There's a lot more effort that goes into one or
yeah,
the other."
I would
Yeah.
definitely, my second question would be, okay, what kind of actual play are you trying to make?
Mm.
Um, are you just trying to have a game where you and your friends are at a table, right, playing a game? Are
Yeah.
you trying to have an educational one where you're talking about, you know, mechanics of the game and like trying to like figure out more like theory, like design theory? Are you
Yeah.
trying to do something that's very story focused and narrative focused? Are you trying to do something that sounds like an audio drama? Are you trying to
Mhm.
do something that like really, I would like, the second thing I would be like, what kind of actual play are you trying to make, so that you can lean in and be intentional about, this is what I'm trying to make, what
Mhm.
steps do I need to take to make that thing?
And then would you say, because there is the technical side and there's the creative side, like I
Mhm.
would also say you have to be intentional on who's going to be at your table
Absolutely,
for that creative
100%.
side. Everybody
Mhm.
needs to be in agreement about what the tone is.
Mhm.
Just vibe well together, just have a good connection, I guess, at its kind of base. And
Yeah,
then you have to be like, what kind of mic do you have?
right.
What
Like,
kind of
yeah, what is this going to sound like,
yeah,
right? Like,
what kind of headphones are you, do you have earbuds? There's that,
yeah.
so
And
yeah.
yeah, and that comes down to like, and even, yeah,
It's hard because even at the beginning, like you said, like I would just send someone a mic who I really wanted to play with.
right, like yeah,
So
like if there was some like, again, we started off Tales Get Told with someone
right,
playing using like earbud
and
mics, right?
it like kind of grew into something.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I would, so I wouldn't like, even if, I would say when you're starting off, try to envision, what is my dream version of this?
Okay.
What is
Okay.
like, if I was sitting back and I was like, I want to listen to an actual play that I've
Mm.
made, what is the thing that I want to make? Have that dream version of it, and then look at, okay, what do I have in front of me
Right.
materially? Do I
Mm.
have a great microphone? Could I get a better microphone if I can't? If not,
That's
this
fine.
is click, write that down, this is something I want to get in the future.
Mm.
um don't let that stop you from making it now,
Right.
but know what, but have that vision of what it is you want this to grow into, which is going to save you so many growing pains,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that off the bat, rather than having to trip over and discover it later, right?
Yeah.
Sit down, plan, and go, okay, what are we making?
Right. Yeah.
How do we get it to that point?
But then there's that other side of like, if your first question is the why,
Hmm.
because that first question could, the answer could just be, oh, it's just me and my friends and we just want to post it online. Okay,
I
then you don't need like the other stuff.
You're right,
Right.
exactly,
Yeah.
right. If you're right, if that first question then goes scope wise,
Right.
is
Right.
this
Yeah.
just the thing that we're doing, or am I doing this because I want to make a super high quality, highly
Yeah.
polished
Yeah. Yeah.
product,
Yeah.
right, for people, um Or is this just a thing I'm doing with my friends? And if so, then hey, the size of your scope. Maybe your headset microphone is good enough for you. And hey,
That's fine. You're
thumbs up
living
to
an
you. That's
easier
fine.
life than I am, my
You're
friend.
hey, if that works for you, that's hey, you'll probably find someone who will listen to you. And just know that whatever it is you're doing, you are going to, regardless of what it is, you are going to be alienating the people who aren't into the thing that you're doing.
Of course.
And you're just going to have to be okay with that.
You can't satisfy everybody.
You can't satisfy everyone. And
you can't create an AP for everybody.
Exactly. Sure. And so just know that whatever the reality is of the thing that you're making, there are going to be people who are going to like it. There are going to be people who are not going to like it. Live with it and let it be whatever it's going to be, and let it grow into whatever it is you want it to grow into. And the people who are going to like it are going to like it, and the people who are not are not.
And sometimes they leave comments about how much they don't like it.
And just know that person has apparently nothing else going on in their
nothing
life.
else. Also, they're jealous.
Obviously, because what have they made?
Jealous. They're jealous. Let me just let you know.
You made a thing. They probably didn't.
I had to tell one of my players this because there was some, I don't know if it's a negative comment, but anyway, I was like, this person wishes they were at my table right now. They wish they had me as a GM like you do. And they're just, I'm not even trying to be like, oh, hate is gonna hate, no, they're probably jealous.
Right. If they're if someone is complaining about a player at an actual play not doing the thing that they think that they should be doing, that means that person is imagining themselves at that table and what they would have been doing. Exactly.
It kind of went into like a wider conversation of like, how much of this is like genuinely, let's look into it to see if it's not landing correctly. Versus like, oh, this person's sexist. Like, and they wouldn't say this to a man who was playing this role or something like that. So we kind of got into that and like, how much do you take in like criticism? That's like you're like, okay, maybe look into it. Or how much is like, oh, this is because I am a certain gender or because of my skin color or something. How do you kind of decipher and sift through that?
Yeah, thankfully we haven't gotten a lot of negative stuff for Tales Yet Told. There's like, we've had like I can think of like one negative comment on like a short form we posted during like Voices in the Wood, where someone was making fun, or someone was like, this is the worst old woman voice I've ever heard, to a player who was doing an old woman voice. And it's just like, you really took time out of your day on a short form platform where I know you could have just scrolled and gone on to something else. When you opened up the comments to go, that's the worst old person voice I've ever heard. That means that something about our thing stood out enough to you that it embedded in you, and you had to think about what was good and what wasn't, right? Which on some level means it was working. Like,
first of all, thanks for the interaction. It actually
thanks for the interaction. thanks for letting us live inside your head.
Rent free.
Truly. We didn't ask for your opinion, but apparently you thought enough about everything else about it to pick out the one thing that you thought you didn't like. That goes to show me that you obviously
want to be at this table.
Obviously, you either want to be at this table, you want to do something like this, or like there's like there people just don't react in those ways to things that they don't care about.
Right. If you're just like complacent about something, I don't care.
If it was just boring, they'd scroll and leave.
I know. Yeah. So to kind of transition, we only have like 10 more minutes before I want to let you go.
Okay.
But I want to talk about like representation and community in the TTRPG space. We talked about it a little bit before we got started. You mentioned a little bit. I love my Electric State crew for season 2. Love them. They're very much very good at what they do. They are all white. And I did like try to be more purposeful about casting and being diverse. This is just how it happened to roll out. So as a Black creator in this niche space, I still think it's pretty niche. It's still
100%.
Yeah. What has your experience been like as a Black person? Like have you noticed anything specific because of like being black, or anything
Yeah,
overt, or is it kind of subtle, or
I mean, like both in ways, right? Like
okay.
there's the as a black creator in this space, and like as like generally,
Mm,
people of color in this space get less attention than white people. That's
okay.
just like a fact, right? Where you will see a lot of all white shows, or even white players
Yes.
in shows with other people of color get
Mm,
more attention and more eyes on and more engagement in
mm.
their works than people of color.
Yes.
And that's just like that's true. That's
That's it's true everywhere in every industry and
right.
everywhere you go.
The
Like,
innate racism of it is just
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
just kind of baked in, right? Not to be like, oh, it is what it is, but like that's the
It,
reality in
it
which we
truly
live
is
in,
what it is. Like,
right?
we can't escape it. So,
Right. And so thankfully I've seen over like the past year or so this like shift, right? Of
mm,
there's been more and more like BIPOC led and like only shows. There's
yes,
been
yeah.
a lot more like focus on casting diverse tables, which does tragically also mean that there is a rise in tokenization of people of color at certain tables as well,
Yeah.
because there are going to be people who are like, oh man, I just realized I cast this thing and there's no black people in it, and oh man, I don't want to be canceled. I'm gonna
I
I'm
don't
gonna
want to
go
be
right.
canceled.
And so there's definitely like both me and like friends that I know that have definitely been reached out to by productions who were looking to fill us.
You were the token. You had to come in. Yeah.
Right. And like exactly, right? Like that has happened to me. I've
Okay.
also met so many people who genuinely are like have diversity as a primary like philosophy of the way that they produce
Right.
and cast tables, because they're like the different perspectives and like the different cultures and different identities
Yes.
coming to this table all add something magical to this.
Mm,
um and as I was saying, like I started off not being in the space, not knowing the issues at hand, right?
mm.
But also again having lived in and around primarily white people because of the state of the places that I lived in,
Yeah.
right? I started my game
Mm-hmm.
all white people, right? And I think what it came to from that was, and then immediately once we started doing prayers in the static, like within like the first year of starting,
Right.
we started branching. I began branching out, and I was like, oh wait, there are people in this space now that I knew people and I was
Right. Right.
interacting with them and I was,
Yeah.
whatever. um I was able to start bringing in more people into the games that I was playing, and my games have only been better since. And I think what it comes down to is like, if you want to find people to play the games with and people you can trust to tell the stories, it comes down to just playing with more people in
Right.
general
Right.
in
Right.
stuff that
Just
isn't yours.
okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Playing like guesting on people's
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
be that, or doing home games with people. If there's a person that you're interested in playing in a game, like in like a produced game with, maybe you start off playing a home game with them, see if the vibes are
Yes.
right, see if that's
Yes.
like, and it's going to, thankfully I've seen again so many more people of color be able to
Mm.
have their be able to fucking show off how amazing they
Yes.
are and have those shows have spotlights put on them. And it's a learning and growing process for every producer of like, how do I make sure that I'm keeping diversity
At the foref. Yeah.
at the forefront in a way that isn't like doing it just to do it is tokenizing. Doing it because you enjoy, like you've seen this person's work and you're like, I want to either give this person a platform or
Yeah.
I want to work with this person and be able to do it. Like that's genuine connection, and that helps build genuine community in ways that
Yes. And
are
you're not
just
just trying to fill a quota. You're like,
exactly right.
okay, got
Right.
it.
And people, and like, and that came, and like that when I was doing Voices in the Wood, right, which was our first major season that wasn't our core cast. And so when
Yes.
I came down and I was still casting primarily from people that I knew,
Mm.
I did have to be very intentional with myself of I cannot have there be more white people than there are people of color in this.
Yeah.
And that
Okay.
came from a personal desire of I want to start fixing the mistakes of
Mm.
Tales Yet Told, having been primarily like I'm the creative lead, like
Right.
I'm that for Tales Yet Told, but our primary table at the time was still an all white cast,
Mm.
all queer cast still, but still all white. And so when it came to doing Voices in the Wood, I was like, hey, I want to be intentional in that.
Right.
I want people of color to be able to help mold this world and the story, to have more perspectives. And
It's
I
truly about the perspective, because being a person of color, you truly are coming with like, oh, I have this lived experience, and
Mhm.
even if you're white and you're queer and you have that like cool, but like there's just something that like being a
It's not
person of color is just different. You
right.
just live in a different world than someone who's like white but like also queer, and they have their stuff like
Right.
we get it, but it's just
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
it's different. It's different.
And so it came down to being very intentional and trying to do the same moving forward.
Yeah.
But I do still have my core cast, and
Yeah.
I'm not and my future for that, and the reason why I still have that core cast, and like why Strangers in the Wood 2 didn't have a cast change, right? To
Mhm.
have like to bring on another person of color, right? To not make it an all white table is
Yeah.
because I knew if I was doing that, it would be tokenizing. I would be doing it
Because
purely for
yes.
I wanted a person of color in this story that was already built with three people, and the story is kind of built around them
Right.
right now.
Right.
If I try to add even another person to the cast, regardless of who it was, I'd be having to do a lot of work to like stuff them into the story and make them feel as important to the three characters we just spent 29 episodes dealing with.
Right.
And so I didn't want to put a person of color in the role of trying to feel like to being a token, because that's basically what it would
What it
be,
would have
right?
been. Yeah.
And trying to have them try to like force themselves into a story that had three main characters already.
Right.
And like, could it have been done? For sure, we would have been able to figure it out. I don't think that it would have done the story justice, and I don't think
Mm.
it would have done that performer justice.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been
Um,
fair to them.
Exactly. And so the
Yeah.
goal is, okay, well, once the main cast starts moving into different stories, we can bring more people in. And so from the ground up, those stories have these different people all all in consideration, right? Um, from the get-go, rather than trying to stuff
Yeah.
them into a story that's midway through.
So you're saying, so let's say somebody is trying to be intentional about having a truly diverse cast. We want to see different skin tones. So
Mhm.
you're saying start from the beginning might be easier than trying to like
So
graft somebody on to like an already established thing.
I would say this is a case by case basis, right? If your
Yeah.
story works in a way where people can eat, like you can
Oh yeah.
bring
Yeah.
in a person and have that person still feel as important and as like embedded in the story as everyone else, absolutely go for it. For Strangers in the Wood, I didn't see a way that would be could be
Yeah.
done
Yeah.
gracefully. Um, um, I like yeah, it comes down like I would say best case scenario, do it from the get-go. Have
Mm.
that in mind. Know that you want your story to be diverse and go for it. Failing that, if you're at a table where you're like, I want to move this into that direction,
Mm.
then try to figure out if that is a story where it is possible to even bring on another
Right.
person and have
Right.
it feel better. If not, then maybe that is what it is. But
Mm.
if your goal is that you want the story to be more diverse, then or your stories to be more diverse, then maybe don't have that be the only story you're telling, right? Maybe it's time to bring those same players into a new story where you then bring more people in and try to start that off from as well. It's easier to start off good than trying to fix, the ship
Yeah.
mid-flight.
Yeah. I think
Uh,
it's kind of, I think for me it's kind of hard because I do want more black people to be a part of my games, but
Mhm.
we don't want it to be like a token thing. But
Right.
you do want to be intentional at
Mhm.
the same time.
I
So it's kind of
would
like, okay, so how do you find that balance of like, I am bringing you in because you're black, but not because you're black. But
right. I mean,
it's
but here's the thing. Sometimes it can be that and it not be tokenizing, right?
okay. Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
you were like right, like if we were telling a Southern Gothic story where we want
Yeah,
the
yeah,
black
yeah.
perspective and in like the in 20s
New
New
Orleans.
Orleans,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
If you start off that knowing I want this to be all black people, it is
Uh-huh.
not tokenizing to
Right,
go
right,
to
right.
black
Yeah,
people
yeah,
and be
yeah.
like, I want you in here, right?
Yeah.
That's it's not the same, right? Because that's coming from a place of respect, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
I am looking for you to tell your story specifically because of this experience that I know that you have a connection with, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is not tokenizing. Um because because you are valuing that person, their perspective and their skills for what they are. It is the focus is on them, not the fact that you have a seat at the table that needs to be black and brown,
Right,
right?
right, right. Yes.
Now if you're looking to like bring on more people and like because they're diverse, to bring a more diverse perspective and bring more
Mm.
people onto your game, I would say starting off from that, okay, what is it that you think diversity brings to your table
Mm.
in like a so like in the way of like, is it that you're looking for a particular perspective for the story, that like the same for like the all black game, right? Or if there's like an aspect of your setting, right, where it's like
Mm.
someone, and this of course goes to like all queer identities as well, right? Like if this is like if it's like I need someone with this specific kind of
Mm.
experience, or if someone has, or if you have a general scenario that different perspectives all have their own take on, right?
Yes,
Being like,
yeah.
okay, I'm looking for someone who has experience with this kind of like a religious trauma that deals with Christianity as like an effect of like colonialism, right? That's such a broad umbrella that fits so many different identities under.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can specifically be like, hey, I'm looking for a black person who has this kind of experience with XYZ, dealing with religious trauma and the way that Christianity has affected the black community, right?
Yes.
Both the same thing, one more specific, one more broad, and can fit other things, right? And so if you're trying to change your change your story and bring on more people of color, more diverse people, then go, okay, what perspective am I missing here in this story? What would be interesting?
There you go.
What would be
Yeah.
fun to play
Yeah,
with?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then find the people who align with that and want to help
Yeah.
you tell that story and bring their own perspective to it.
It sounds like the question is of the why you're bringing somebody on. So
Yeah, the
are you
intentionality, right?
yeah,
Why are you
yeah.
bringing this person
The
on?
theme of this entire conversation, why are you bringing someone on because they are a different skin tone that will look good, or because you genuinely want
Right. Are you actually in
their
community with
perspective?
this person? Are you actually engaging with this person as a creative person and not just a seat at the table that you need filled?
Yeah. So on that note, here, let me see.
Say that again.
That little bell sound, I don't think you heard it.
Oh no, did I not hear it? I have it
He
open.
missed the bell.
Oh
Before
my
we
god, it was muted on my
he missed the bell. You
ear.
guys. Before we wrap up, that bell, that's the dinner bell, you guys. Okay. Before we wrap up, do you have any current or upcoming games, projects, anything else you'd like to share before we head out?
Yeah. So hey, if you like any of the stuff that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
or especially around the intentionality of stories and collaboration between players and their game master, and just people at the table telling horrifying stories that are sometimes cathartic and therapeutic, but never therapy, you should go listen to Tales Yet Told.
There you go. There you go.
You can find it everywhere you get your podcasts. It's called Tales Yet Told, and you can find it everywhere on the internet that matters, on social media at Tales Yet Told, and Blue Sky at talesyettold.com. We just released our latest episode of Our Lives in the Wood, an anthology series that takes place in the same settings as Voices in the Wood and Strangers in the Wood, that being Sublime County, telling the stories of the tragic people who live in this world,
So
and
tragic.
how horrifying the American 80s could have been, or was actually.
It's a great story, you guys. I know it sounds pretty bleak. No,
it, but it's also funny
it's also
sometimes,
funny, you
and
guys.
it can be
It's-
so many things.
It's heartfelt and it's moving, and the cast is really good and has great chemistry. I just want to say thank you, Kendrick, for showing up. I feel like I got like a 2-hour kind of seminar for free. So
There
thank
you
you
go.
so much. I am still learning and growing. I got a lot of good insights from you, so I really appreciate it.
No,
And
thank
I
you so
know,
much for having me.
yeah, I'm hoping you had a good conversation with me
Yes.
here, and I'm looking forward to like more collabs in the future, wherever that may hold within the mini-sided network and beyond, and all that good stuff.
Yes.
But yes, everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is a semi-new format for us. We're excited to see where it goes. Until next time, remember, everybody, no fighting at the table. And Kendrick, point at the camera. Point at the camera like me. Unless it's in character.
Unless
Okay.
it's in character.
Bye.
See y'all.